Stoicism, one of the most practical and enduring philosophies in human history, begins with a simple recognition. The world is chaotic, unpredictable, and indifferent to our desires. Life offers both beauty and hardship, triumph and tragedy, peace and disruption. We cannot dictate the flow of events, the behavior of others, or the circumstances that come our way. Yet, despite this external instability, Stoicism offers a powerful promise. Inner stability is always within our reach. The Stoics taught that human unhappiness rarely comes from the world itself, but from the conflict between our intentions and our actions, between what we want and what we actually do. When our inner life lacks structure, when our behavior contradicts our values, and when our emotions guide our choices more than our principles, we experience unnecessary suffering. This inner disorder, this inconsistency, is one of the primary causes of anxiety, regret, frustration, and self-doubt. To force yourself to be consistent is not about becoming mechanical or suppressing your humanity. It is not about perfection, nor is it about punishing yourself for failure. Instead, it is a call to alignment, to bring your daily actions into harmony with your highest values. It means developing an inner coherence so that your character is not pulled apart by impulses, excuses, or fleeting moods. In the Stoic sense, forcing yourself to be consistent means leading yourself with the guidance of reason rather than being dragged by emotion. The Stoics believed that consistency is the gateway to freedom. Not freedom in the external sense, political freedom or freedom from obligations, but freedom of the soul, the freedom to respond to life intelligently rather than reactively. When your actions are directed by your values instead of dictated by your feelings, you free yourself from dependence on external circumstances. You begin to cultivate an inner calm that cannot easily be shaken by misfortune, disappointment, or uncertainty. To understand why consistency is so essential, the Stoics invite us to look at the nature of human behavior. Most people live in a state of contradiction. They say they value health, yet neglect their bodies. They claim to value peace, yet create drama through poor choices. They want to focus, yet allow distractions to dominate their days. They desire wisdom, but seek comfort instead of growth. This gap between intention and action generates an internal friction that wears down the mind. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most renowned Stoic philosophers, wrote that a person cannot find peace when they waste energy fighting against their own conscience. Consistency closes this gap. It transforms your life not by changing the external world, but by aligning the internal one. When your values, decisions, and actions move in the same direction, you eliminate much of the mental tension that comes from living chaotically. You become grounded. You gain clarity. You stand on solid inner ground even when the world is shifting around you. Think of consistency as the foundation of a house. Without a stable base, even the most beautifully designed structure will collapse. In the same way, without consistent action, even the best intentions fall apart. Consistency builds discipline, and discipline builds character. Over time, the person who repeatedly chooses their values over their impulses becomes stronger, calmer, and more resilient. The Stoics understood that greatness is not achieved through occasional bursts of inspiration, but through persistent, humble practice. But what makes consistency challenging? The Stoics were realistic about human nature. They knew that we are easily influenced by our environment, easily swayed by emotion, and easily tempted by comfort. The mind seeks ease, not excellence. This is why Stoicism emphasizes deliberate effort. To be consistent, you must sometimes resist your immediate desires. You must act according to what is right and reasonable, not merely according to what feels good in the moment. This is the essence of forcing yourself, not through harshness, but through leadership. You must lead yourself as a wise commander leads soldiers, with firmness, clarity, and purpose. The Stoics also recognized that consistency is the bridge between intention and identity. You are not defined by what you dream of doing, or what you occasionally accomplish. You are defined by what you consistently do. A person becomes brave by acting bravely repeatedly, calm by practicing calmness repeatedly, wise by seeking wisdom repeatedly. Stoicism is a philosophy of repetition, not mindless repetition, but intentional practice. Every day, the Stoic asks, "How can I live according to my principles today?" And then they take action, not once, but continuously. When you adopt this mindset, a powerful transformation begins to unfold. You start trusting yourself. You become someone whose word means something, both to others and to yourself. Self-respect grows because you no longer betray your intentions. And as trust grows, so does confidence. You feel capable of facing challenges because you are no longer sabotaging your own efforts. This is where the phrase, "everything falls into place," reveals its deeper meaning. Stoicism does not claim that life becomes easier or that obstacles disappear. Rather, it teaches that when the inner world is ordered, the outer world becomes manageable. Problems that once overwhelmed you become challenges you can handle. Setbacks become lessons instead of catastrophes. You navigate life with clarity instead of confusion, with intention instead of impulse. Consistency is the quiet force that makes this possible. It transforms chaos into structure, confusion into clarity, and fear into resilience. The world may remain unpredictable, but you no longer are. You become stable in a world that is not. This is the gift of Stoic practice. With this understanding, the following 13 Stoic points will show precisely how consistency creates inner order, strengthens character, and helps cultivate a life where, step by step and choice by choice, everything begins to fall into place, not through luck or circumstance, but through the steady power of disciplined and intentional living. Consistency aligns you with reason. Stoicism teaches that a rational life is a peaceful life. At the core of Stoic philosophy lies the belief that human beings suffer most when they are ruled by impulses rather than guided by reason. Reason is our unique strength, our ability to think before acting, to reflect before reacting, and to choose long-term virtue over short-term pleasure. When the Stoics speak of consistency, they mean behaving in a way that reflects our rational nature, not being pulled in different directions by fleeting emotions or impulsive desires. Consistency, therefore, is not merely a habit, it is the outward expression of an inner harmony. To understand how deeply consistency aligns us with reason, consider what happens when we act impulsively. Impulse is fast, emotional, reactive. It arises suddenly and demands immediate obedience. Impulse is what makes a person lash out in anger, indulge in procrastination, break promises, or abandon goals the moment discomfort appears. Impulses are not evil, they are simply primitive. They come from the instinctive, animal part of the mind. They are based on temporary feelings rather than enduring principles. Reason, on the other hand, sees further. Reason evaluates consequences, considers values, and looks beyond the emotional moment. When we act rationally, we are not suppressing emotion. We are simply choosing not to be enslaved by it. This is why Stoicism insists that consistent behavior is the clearest sign that a person is living according to reason. When you consistently do what is right, even when you don't feel like it, you prove to yourself that your inner compass is stronger than the fluctuating winds of emotion. Acting rationally removes confusion. Much of human confusion comes from inconsistency, wanting one thing while doing another, saying one thing while living differently, chasing conflicting desires, or allowing different moods to pull you in opposite directions. When your actions are guided by reason, your decisions follow a coherent structure. You know why you do what you do. Your intentions, your behaviors, and your beliefs stop contradicting each other. This mental alignment eliminates a huge amount of stress and uncertainty. Imagine a person who claims to value health but constantly overeats, or someone who wants success but avoids meaningful effort, or someone who desires peaceful relationships but frequently gives in to anger. These contradictions create inner turmoil. They damage self-respect. They make life feel chaotic, not because the world is chaotic, but because the self is divided. A person who is pulled in many directions internally will always feel lost, no matter how calm the external world is. Stoicism teaches that internal coherence is the foundation of inner peace. When you act consistently with reason, you create a unified self. You know who you are. You know what you stand for. You can trust your own decisions. There is no need to fight with yourself or debate endlessly about what you should do. Your guiding principles have already shaped your path. Every action becomes an expression of your character rather than your mood. Regret, too, fades when you act rationally. Most regret comes from acting impulsively, saying something in anger, wasting time, making decisions out of fear, or choosing comfort over growth. These actions may feel good in the moment, but often lead to long-term dissatisfaction. When you choose reason over impulse, you reduce the likelihood of regretting your choices later. You are acting from a place of clarity, not confusion, from virtue, not weakness. Even if the outcome of a rational decision is not ideal, you can still feel at peace knowing you acted deliberately and honorably. Think of Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, who still reminded himself daily to act with reason, not impulse. He believed that the rational mind is the only true sanctuary. For Marcus, consistency was not about rigidity. It was about living according to his principles regardless of circumstance. His actions as emperor reflected his internal discipline, self-restraint, justice, humility, and calmness. He understood that power without rationality leads to tyranny, but power guided by reason creates harmony. Epictetus, born into slavery, taught that freedom begins with mastery over the mind. When you act consistently with reason, no one can force you into emotional chains. You become internally free. You might face hardship, difficulty, or injustice, but your actions remain your own. Reason becomes your shield against manipulation, temptation, and fear. A person who lives according to reason is not swayed by insults, does not collapse under pressure, and does not abandon their values for temporary comfort. Consistency with reason also creates predictability, not in the external world, but within yourself. When you are rationally consistent, you become someone others can trust, and someone you can trust. You no longer surprise yourself with your own weakness. You no longer break promises to yourself. You no longer make decisions you later cannot explain. This steadiness strengthens your identity and builds confidence. Additionally, living according to reason allows you to conserve mental energy. Inconsistency is exhausting. When you are torn between multiple impulses, when you follow your mood instead of your values, you spend enormous mental effort correcting mistakes, reversing decisions, apologizing for emotional reactions, and trying to regain control. A rational, consistent life minimizes this wasted energy. You act with purpose, which creates efficiency, clarity, and emotional stability. Psychologically, consistency with reason strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for discipline, planning, and long-term thinking. Meanwhile, impulsive behavior strengthens the amygdala and the limbic system, the parts responsible for fight or flight reactions, cravings, and emotional volatility. Stoic practice, therefore, is not just philosophy, it is neurological training. The more consistently you act with reason, the stronger your rational mind becomes. This leads to better decisions, calmer emotions, and greater resilience. In practical terms, aligning yourself with reason means asking the right questions. Is this action aligned with my values? Will this choice benefit me in the long term? What would a wise person do right now? Am I acting from clarity or impulse? Does this behavior reflect the person I want to become? These questions shift your focus from the immediate moment to the broader arc of your character and your life. Over time, asking these questions becomes automatic, and consistent, rational behavior becomes second nature. Ultimately, consistency aligns you with reason because it unites your inner world. It brings harmony between thought, intention, and action. It elevates you above impulsive desires and connects you to a deeper, steadier source of strength. In this state, confusion fades, regret diminishes, and contradiction dissolves. What remains is clarity, a clear mind, a steady character, and a life guided not by chaos, but by wisdom. Discipline builds character. The Stoics believed that character is not built in moments of inspiration, but in moments of discipline. Character is not something given to us at birth, nor is it the result of a few dramatic actions. Rather, character is shaped quietly and gradually by what we choose to do day after day, especially when it is difficult. In the Stoic worldview, your character, your virtues, habits, and sense of self is the sum of your repeated actions. Who you are is shaped far more by consistency than by occasional bursts of effort. When we say, character isn't what you occasionally do, it is what you repeatedly do, we are echoing one of the most essential truths of Stoicism. Anyone can be patient for a moment, courageous once, or disciplined for a single day. But true character emerges not from isolated actions, but from patterns. Your consistent behaviors become your identity. This inner confidence is one of the greatest rewards of discipline. Stoic discipline is not rigid or harsh. It is flexible, wise, and measured. It recognizes that perfection is impossible, but progress is always possible. A disciplined person is not someone who never fails, but someone who corrects quickly, returns to their values, and continues forward with humility. Consistency does not require never breaking. It requires always returning. Ultimately, discipline is the slow, steady creation of your best self. It shapes your mind, strengthens your character, and aligns your actions with your highest values. It transforms your life from the inside out, quietly, gradually, and powerfully. Discipline builds the kind of character that remains unshaken by adversity and grounded in wisdom. It turns you into the type of person who does not merely talk about virtues, but embodies them. And this, the Stoics believed, is the essence of a life well lived. Not brilliance, not talent, not luck, but disciplined consistency that shapes you into someone worthy of your own respect. Focus on what you control. One of the most foundational principles in Stoicism is the idea that peace comes from focusing only on what you can control and releasing your attachment to everything you cannot. The Stoics believed that human beings suffer most when they try to bend the world to their will, or when they cling to expectations about how things should be. Reality, however, is indifferent to our preferences. Life unfolds according to nature, not according to our desires. When you place your happiness in things outside your control, other people's actions, external events, or unpredictable outcomes, you set yourself up for frustration, disappointment, and emotional instability. But when you narrow your focus to the one thing that is always yours, your behavior, your effort, your choices, your attitude, your interpretations, you reclaim your inner stability. You create peace within chaos because your well-being is no longer hostage to circumstances. The Stoics summarized this elegant truth in a single concept, the dichotomy of control. It is the recognition that some things are up to us and some things are not. Up to us are our judgments, desires, aversions, actions, and responses. Not up to us are the opinions of others, the outcome of events, the past, the future, and the countless external forces that shape life. Once you see this distinction clearly, you begin to understand where your energy should and should not be invested. The line, "You cannot control outcomes, but you can control effort," reflects one of the most powerful Stoic teachings. Outcomes depend on 1,000 variables: chance, timing, other people's decisions, economic factors, natural forces, many of which are beyond our influence. Effort, however, is always within our grasp. When you take consistent action, rooted in discipline and clarity, you step into your rightful sphere of control. You may not guarantee success, but you guarantee self-respect. You may not guarantee that things will go your way, but you guarantee that you will face whatever happens with integrity. The Stoics believe that focusing on effort over outcome creates emotional stability. When your peace depends on the success of your actions, you live in constant anxiety. You fear failure, you fear judgment, and you fear loss. But when your peace depends only on the quality of your actions rather than the result of them, you become stable and grounded. You can act boldly because you are no longer terrified of failure. You can embrace challenges because you know that even if the outcome is unfavorable, your behavior can still be virtuous. This internal shift from outcome to effort transforms how you see the world. It allows you to remain calm under pressure because you know that pressure cannot control your responses. It allows you to remain composed in uncertainty because uncertainty does not dictate your character. It allows you to remain focused in chaos because chaos cannot dictate your discipline. The outer world becomes less intimidating when you understand that it does not define you, only your actions do. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This strength is not arrogance or detachment. It is clarity. When you focus on what you control, you step into a state of mental freedom. You no longer chase things that cannot be caught. You no longer waste life trying to change what is unchangeable. Instead, you direct your energy toward the one thing that shapes your destiny, your behavior. Epictetus, once a slave who became one of the greatest Stoic teachers, lived this truth with remarkable purity. He could not control the conditions of his early life, the cruelty of his master, or the circumstances of his freedom. But he could control his character, his reactions, and his pursuit of wisdom. By focusing on what he could control, Epictetus transformed suffering into strength. He became a living example of the Stoic principle that external conditions cannot imprison the soul. Only your choices can. Consistent action is the application of this principle in daily life. When you act consistently, you reinforce your ability to focus on your sphere of control. Every day you choose discipline over distraction, responsibility over excuses, and virtue over impulse. You strengthen the part of yourself that is truly yours. Consistency creates a kind of psychological gravity, a pull in the direction of your better self. It trains your mind to focus on effort rather than outcome. A person who focuses on outcomes is mentally fragile. Their emotions rise and fall with the tides of life. When outcomes are good, they feel happy. When outcomes are bad, they collapse. Their peace is conditional, dependent on luck, timing, and the behavior of others. But a person who focuses on effort becomes mentally unshakable. Their emotional state is anchored in something stable, their own actions. They can endure failure without losing hope. They can face pressure without breaking. They can handle success without losing humility. Imagine an archer, a metaphor the Stoics often used. The archer can control the practice she has done, the steadiness of her hand, the quality of her aim, and the clarity of her focus. But once the arrow is released, the outcome is not hers. A gust of wind, a sudden movement of the target, or 100 other factors can alter the result. Stoicism teaches that your task is to be the best archer possible, not to guarantee the arrow hits the target. If you have aimed with discipline and shot with integrity, you have succeeded, even if the arrow misses. This philosophy liberates you from the tyranny of results. It encourages you to take action without fear, because your worth is not measured by what happens, but by how you behave. When you internalize this, you become harder to manipulate, because you are no longer dependent on praise or approval. You become harder to discourage, because failure no longer defines you. You become harder to break, because your strength comes from within, not from outcomes. Focusing on what you control also deepens your emotional resilience. Many people suffer because they try to control the uncontrollable. They try to make others like them, try to force situations to go their way, try to keep things from changing. This futile effort drains them mentally and emotionally. But when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, your mind relaxes. anxiety drops, clarity returns. Your energy becomes available for the things that truly matter. Ultimately, focusing on what you control is the foundation of inner stability. Life will always present uncertainty, chaos, and unpredictable events, but these need not disturb your peace. When your attention is fixed on your effort, your behavior, and your response, you become the calm center in the middle of the storm. You move through life with dignity, purpose, and resilience. This inner steadiness is what the Stoics called ataraxia, a state of unshakable tranquility. You cannot control outcomes, but you can always control how you show up. And if your effort is consistent and rooted in virtue, your inner world remains stable, no matter what the outer world becomes. Small daily actions have massive power. The Stoics understood a truth that modern psychology, neuroscience, and behavioral science have only recently begun to articulate clearly. Small, consistent actions, taken daily, accumulate into extraordinary results. They knew that greatness does not come from rare moments of intensity, but from steady, repeated behaviors performed with intention. In a world that celebrates dramatic transformations and sudden breakthroughs, Stoicism reminds us that true growth is quiet, gradual, and built brick by brick. The idea that small daily actions have massive power is rooted in the Stoic recognition of compounding. Just as a single drop of water seems insignificant but can carve stone over time, a single daily habit can reshape your mind, your character, and ultimately your destiny. This principle applies not only to virtue, but to learning, physical health, self-control, and emotional resilience. Every day that you read, train your body, reflect, meditate, practice kindness, or restrain anger, you strengthen the habits that build your best self. Marcus Aurelius, in his private journal, never wrote about performing grand heroic acts. Instead, he focused on simple practices. Getting out of bed when he didn't feel like it. Treating people with fairness, controlling his desires, speaking truthfully, and keeping his mind steady. These actions might seem small, but repeated daily, they forged one of history's most disciplined and admired characters. This is the paradox the Stoics understood perfectly. Small actions feel insignificant in the moment, yet they create enormous transformation over time. Why do small daily actions matter so much? Because the human brain is shaped by repetition. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the idea that the brain rewires itself according to the behaviors you perform regularly. Every time you practice patience instead of anger, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with patience. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you reinforce your capacity for self-control. Eventually, what was once difficult becomes natural. This is the Stoic method. Transform yourself through daily training, not occasional effort. The Stoics believed in the concept of the prohairesis, the rational faculty responsible for choosing right action. This faculty, like a muscle, grows stronger with use. When you practice virtue daily, even in small doses, you build the strength to act virtuously in larger situations. Seneca compared this to learning an instrument. You cannot master it through one intense session. You must practice every day, even for a short time. The same is true for wisdom, discipline, and courage. Small actions are also powerful because they are sustainable. Anyone can exert themselves with extraordinary effort for a day or a week, but intense bursts of action rarely last, and when they stop, progress collapses. Small actions, on the other hand, are easy to maintain and integrate into your identity. They accumulate gradually, like a slow-growing tree whose roots become unshakable. This slow, steady growth is far more reliable than short-lived enthusiasm. Stoics encourage daily reflection as one of the most important small habits. Before sleep, they examined their day. Where did I act wisely? Where did I fall short? What can I improve tomorrow? This nightly practice, though only a few minutes long, sharpened their self-awareness and fortified their moral character. Over months and years, this habit created remarkable clarity and emotional maturity. Physical discipline was also part of the Stoic routine, not because they sought physical perfection, but because training the body trains the mind. A daily walk, a short exercise routine, or simple exposure to discomfort builds resilience. Each small act of discipline strengthens your capacity to handle adversity. You learn to endure, to stay calm, and to remain in control even when challenged. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics intuitively knew: small habits compound. Reading 10 pages a day becomes hundreds of books over a decade. Meditating 5 minutes a day reshapes your nervous system. Writing a little each day creates books. Saving a small amount regularly builds financial stability. Practicing gratitude daily reduces anxiety. Improving by just 1% every day leads to enormous transformation. The Stoics did not chase drastic change. They pursued incremental excellence. They understood that each small daily decision is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. Every moment becomes an opportunity to train yourself. Every action, no matter how small, is part of your character-building process. When you focus on small daily actions, you liberate yourself from the overwhelming pressure of radical transformation. You stop thinking, "I must change everything at once," and instead ask, "What can I do today?" This mindset preserves motivation and prevents burnout. When change becomes manageable, you become far more consistent, and consistency is the fuel of compounding. Ultimately, the Stoics believed that a great life is built not through rare heroic acts, but through small, steady actions aligned with virtue. The work is quiet, but the results are profound. Over time, these actions shape your character, your habits, your identity, and your entire experience of life. Small daily actions are the invisible architects of greatness. They build strength, they build clarity, they build virtue, and through consistency, they build the unshakable character the Stoics considered the highest form of achievement. Consistency reduces emotional turbulence. The Stoics taught that the most unstable person is the one whose actions are governed by emotion rather than principle. When your behavior is determined by mood, impulse, fear, desire, or shifting feelings, your life becomes chaotic. You wake up driven one day and apathetic the next. You are peaceful one moment and furious the next. You are motivated today and discouraged tomorrow. This emotional volatility makes it difficult to sustain progress, build strong habits, or maintain healthy relationships. Consistency, however, brings emotional stability. When you rely on principles instead of feelings, when your actions are grounded in values rather than moods, you become far less reactive. You stop being at the mercy of external events or internal storms. Your emotions may rise and fall, but your behavior remains steady. This steadiness is one of the great gifts of Stoic practice. The Stoics never denied the presence of emotion. They were not emotionless. Instead, they differentiated between feeling emotions and being ruled by emotions. Everyone experiences fear, frustration, excitement, sadness, or desire. But the Stoic goal is to prevent these emotions from dictating your actions. This is where consistency plays a transformative role. When you develop consistent habits, rooted in discipline, reason, and virtue, you create an internal compass that guides your behavior even when your emotions fluctuate. For example, you train even when you feel lazy. You respond calmly even when you feel irritated. You work even when you feel unmotivated. You choose kindness even when you feel slighted. You act with integrity even when you feel tempted. Each of these choices weakens the emotional spikes that typically throw your mind into turmoil. Instead of reacting impulsively, you respond deliberately. Over time, this reduces emotional turbulence because your brain learns that emotions do not control your actions. This is psychological freedom. One of the main causes of stress is internal conflict, the tug of war between what we feel and what we know we should do. When you live inconsistently, This conflict is constant. You feel regret because you didn't follow your values. You feel anxious because you don't trust yourself to remain steady. You feel guilt because you break your own promises. This emotional noise builds into stress, confusion, and frustration. But consistency dissolves this internal conflict. When your actions match your principles, your mind becomes quieter. You experience less self-doubt because you trust yourself. You experience less stress because you aren't constantly fighting your own impulses. You experience less shame because you follow through. Your emotions may still arise, but they no longer pull you off track. Marcus Aurelius wrote repeatedly about the importance of acting according to nature, meaning according to reason, virtue, and duty. When you do what you know is right, regardless of emotional states, you maintain inner harmony. Marcus himself faced unrelenting pressure as emperor, war, betrayal, illness, political instability, but he stayed grounded by relying on consistent practices and principles. His emotions, though present, did not control him. Consistency also reduces anxiety because it creates predictability. When your actions are stable, your mind feels safer. You don't wonder, will I quit today because I'm tired? Will I lose my temper? Will I skip my responsibilities because I'm stressed? A consistent person knows that they will show up, not because they feel like it, but because they have trained themselves to act according to their values. This internal predictability reduces emotional volatility. You no longer scare yourself with uncertainty about your own behavior. You develop a reputation internally. I follow through. This identity creates emotional security. Furthermore, Stoicism teaches that many emotional storms come from reacting to external events you cannot control. When your actions depend on external circumstances, you become emotionally vulnerable. But when your actions depend on internal principles, you become emotionally resilient. Life may bring challenges, but your behavior remains stable. This stability, in turn, calms the emotional system, because uncertainty and helplessness, two major triggers of emotional distress, are removed. Consistency also transforms how you interpret emotions. When you have a clear system of principles guiding your behavior, emotions become information rather than commands. Anger tells you something matters, but you choose your response. Fear signals risk, but you choose your response. Sadness signals loss, but you choose your response. This separation between emotion and action is one of the highest forms of emotional intelligence. It is also one of the great outcomes of Stoic consistency. Over time, consistent behavior based on principle rewires your emotional responses. You become less reactive, less irritable, less anxious, and less overwhelmed. Emotional disturbances shrink because your rational mind is now stronger than your emotional impulses. This does not mean emotions disappear. It means they no longer dominate you. Ultimately, consistency reduces emotional turbulence because it gives you a stable foundation to stand on. When your actions are rooted in values rather than moods, you become calm, predictable to yourself, and grounded. You stop being a prisoner to your emotions and instead become their observer and master. A consistent person is harder to disturb because their peace is built on internal stability, not external circumstances. And this, the Stoics believed, is one of the greatest forms of freedom, duty before comfort. Stoicism teaches that human beings grow not in moments of pleasure, but in moments of principled action, especially when that action is difficult. The Stoics believed that the pursuit of comfort often weakens the soul, while the pursuit of duty strengthens it. When you put duty before comfort, you choose the path that shapes your character, sharpens your reason, and deepens your self-respect. Comfort, on the other hand, is seductive. It whispers, rest a little longer, delay the work, avoid the challenge. It offers ease in the short term, but steals strength in the long term. The Stoics recognize that comfort is not inherently wrong. Rest, pleasure, and enjoyment have their rightful place in life. But trouble begins when comfort becomes the driving principle of your decisions. Comfort is passive, fragile, and short-lived. Duty, however, is enduring. Duty is rooted in values: justice, courage, discipline, honesty, contribution, responsibility. When you act from duty, you act from your highest self. Choosing duty over comfort does not mean rejecting pleasure or living a life of harsh austerity. It means prioritizing what is right over what is easy. It means training the mind to act according to principles rather than impulses. In Stoicism, duty is not just an obligation, it is a path to personal greatness. Comfort rarely challenges you, but duty forces you to rise above your limitations. Marcus Aurelius wrote repeatedly about the necessity of doing what must be done, even when his body wanted rest, or his mind wanted escape. As the emperor, his days were filled with war, politics, and responsibility. Yet he reminded himself every morning, "You were born to do the work of a human being," meaning to serve, to contribute, to act with justice and strength. He knew that greatness was not built on comfort, but on responsibility. Epictetus argued that those who prioritize comfort become slaves to their desires. He believed that true freedom comes from mastering oneself, not indulging oneself. To him, every time you choose comfort over duty, you strengthen the chains that bind you to weakness. But every time you choose duty over comfort, you break those chains. This is why Stoics emphasized voluntary hardship, fasting, challenging physical training, cold exposure, simplicity. These practices weren't punishments. They were training exercises to strengthen the will and weaken the grip of comfort. Consistency is impossible without the willingness to put duty first. The reason most people fail to remain consistent is that they rely on how they feel rather than what they know they must do. Feelings fluctuate, comfort tempts, but duty remains constant. If you rely on your mood, you will only act when you feel inspired or motivated. If you rely on duty, you act regardless of mood because you act from principle. This practice builds inner strength. When you consistently choose duty, you teach yourself that you can be relied upon, especially under pressure. You learn that you are capable of discipline, capable of integrity, capable of overcoming difficulty. You learn that your mind belongs to you, not to impulse. This inner strength becomes a shield against fear, laziness, and distraction. Placing duty before comfort also sharpens your focus. Comfort scatters the mind, pulling it toward distraction and indulgence. Duty clarifies the mind, bringing it back to what truly matters. When you act from duty, you prioritize the essential and ignore the trivial. This creates a focused, meaningful life, rather than one filled with superficial comforts. Moreover, choosing duty over comfort trains you to tolerate discomfort, a skill that greatly expands your potential. Most growth happens outside your comfort zone. If you only act when it is easy, you will never stretch yourself far enough to grow. But if you choose duty consistently, you build resilience. You become comfortable with discomfort. You stop fearing difficulty and start seeing it as an opportunity to train yourself. Duty also elevates your relationships. When you put duty first, you honor commitments, keep promises, and act with integrity. You become a person others can depend on. Comfort may tell you to avoid difficult conversations, ignore responsibilities, or act selfishly. Duty compels you to do the right thing, even when it is inconvenient. This builds trust, credibility, and respect. In the end, the Stoic path is not about rejecting comfort entirely. It is about ensuring that comfort does not override virtue. When you allow comfort to rule you, you stagnate. When you put duty first, you rise. The Stoics believed that the purpose of life is not to feel good, but to be good, to develop character, wisdom, courage, and integrity. Comfort rarely leads to any of these. Duty does. Ultimately, placing duty before comfort is an act of self-mastery. It allows you to take charge of your mind, your habits, and your destiny. It builds the foundation of consistency. It shapes you into the person you are meant to be. And most importantly, It grants you the deep satisfaction of living in alignment with your highest values. You become trustworthy to yourself. One of the most profound insights in Stoicism is the idea that inner freedom comes from trusting yourself. Most people, however, do not trust themselves, not because they are weak, but because they have trained themselves not to. They make promises to themselves and break them. They set goals and abandon them. They swear they will change and then fall back into old patterns. Over time, this weakens self-respect and erodes inner confidence. The Stoics understood that one of the greatest forms of personal power is becoming someone whose own word matters. When you say you will do something and you actually follow through, your self-respect grows. You no longer see yourself as unreliable or inconsistent. You begin to view yourself as a person of integrity, someone capable of self-mastery. This transformation is quiet but life-changing. When you keep promises to yourself, you build an internal structure of trust. Just as trust is built in relationships, through repeated honesty and reliability, trust with yourself is built through repeated action aligned with your commitments. Each time you follow through, no matter how small the promise, you reinforce the identity of someone who is capable, disciplined, and reliable. Most people fail to understand how damaging broken self-promises can be. Every time you tell yourself, "I'll start tomorrow, I'll wake up early, I'll stay calm, I'll finish this work," and then fail to follow through, you silently teach your mind that your own word means nothing. You create an inner environment where doubt grows. Your subconscious begins to believe, "I don't follow through, I don't finish what I start." This belief, repeated often enough, becomes your identity. The Stoics saw this as a form of slavery, a mind chained not by external forces, but by internal inconsistency. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you gain control over your own will and actions. To him, the person who cannot trust himself is not free. They may seem free to the outside world, but internally they are governed by weakness, impulse, and excuses. Consistency is the antidote to this inner fragmentation. When you act consistently, you re-establish a bond with your own conscience. You begin to believe in yourself again. Each completed action, each kept promise, each disciplined choice rebuilds the inner foundation that years of inconsistency may have damaged. This self-trust is transformative because it reduces anxiety. Much anxiety comes from being unsure whether you will follow through on your goals. When you don't trust yourself, every commitment feels uncertain. But when you trust yourself, you move through life with confidence. You know that even if challenges arise, you will remain steady, you will take action, you will handle things with integrity. This creates inner peace. Self-trust is also essential for long-term growth. Big dreams require endurance. Endurance requires belief, and belief is built through daily acts of follow-through. When you trust yourself, you no longer sabotage your own progress. You stop quitting early. You stop making excuses. You stop doubting your abilities. You act. You persist. You rise. The Stoics also saw self-trust as a form of moral strength. A person who cannot keep promises to themselves cannot fully commit to virtue. Virtue requires consistent application, consistent kindness, consistent discipline, consistent courage, consistent honesty. Without trust in your own ability to act according to your values, virtue becomes theoretical rather than practical. Becoming trustworthy to yourself also changes how you interact with others. When you trust yourself, others begin to trust you. Reliability radiates outward. You become someone who can be counted on, someone whose word matters, someone who brings stability into relationships. This strengthens your reputation and deepens your connections. But the greatest reward of becoming trustworthy to yourself is internal freedom. When you keep your own promises, you are no longer controlled by impulses or fears. You are guided by intention. You don't run from challenges because you trust your ability to handle them. You don't fear failure because you trust that you will respond with effort and discipline. You don't rely on external validation because your sense of worth comes from your own integrity. This is what Epictetus meant when he said that no person is free who is not master of himself. Freedom is not the absence of responsibility. It is the presence of self-command. It is the ability to govern your mind, your decisions, and your actions with clarity and strength. In the end, becoming trustworthy to yourself is the foundation of Stoic mastery. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you will do what you say you will do. It is the deep, steady respect that grows from consistent action. It is the inner freedom that comes when your word, especially to yourself, becomes a bond. This kind of trust cannot be bought, inherited, or faked. It must be earned. And you earn it one consistent action at a time. Consistency builds momentum. One of the most powerful truths in human behavior, deeply understood by the Stoics, is that consistency creates momentum. Momentum is the invisible force that makes progress feel easier over time. It is the shift from pushing yourself to act, to being pulled forward by the energy of your own repeated actions. Once momentum is built, progress no longer feels like a struggle. It feels like a natural continuation of what you have already started. Stoics recognized momentum long before modern psychology explained it through habits and motivation. They observed that the more you act according to virtue, the more you want to act according to virtue. The more disciplined you become, the easier discipline feels. The more courage you display, the more courage becomes your instinct. What begins as effort eventually becomes identity. In the beginning, consistency feels difficult because you are working against inertia, the force that keeps you in your old patterns. Inertia pulls you back toward familiar habits, even when those habits harm you. Overcoming inertia requires conscious effort, the kind the Stoics called prohairesis, the deliberate choice to act in accordance with reason. But once you break through the initial resistance, you enter what the Stoics understood intuitively. Your actions begin to reinforce each other. Each disciplined act strengthens the next. Each wise decision clears the way for another. This phenomenon is similar to rolling a heavy stone up a hill. The first push is the hardest. But once the stone reaches the top and begins rolling down the other side, very little effort is required to keep it moving. Consistency is the effort that pushes the stone uphill. Momentum is the force that carries it forward afterward. The Stoics believed that momentum is a natural consequence of living in harmony with your values. When you act consistently with reason and virtue, you feel alignment between thought and action. This inner harmony is rewarding. It creates a sense of meaning and purpose. This emotional reward fuels momentum. The mind wants more of what feels meaningful. Therefore, the more consistently you behave, the more naturally you continue to behave that way. Momentum also reduces the mental friction associated with decision-making. When you act inconsistently, every decision becomes a negotiation with yourself. Should I do this today? Do I feel like it? Maybe I'll start tomorrow. But once you build momentum, decisions become automatic. You stop debating and start doing. You don't ask whether you feel like training. You train. You don't question whether to read. You read. You don't analyze whether to act virtuously. You act virtuously. This shift from decision to identity reduces mental fatigue and reinforces momentum. Your actions feel inevitable because they are no longer choices. They are expressions of who you are becoming. Marcus Aurelius captured this idea when he wrote about the importance of building a rhythm of virtuous acts. He believed that, like a trained athlete or a seasoned craftsman, a person who practices virtue consistently develops a kind of ethical muscle memory. Virtue becomes fluid. Just as a musician no longer has to think consciously about every note, a disciplined person no longer has to force themselves into action. Epictetus also emphasized momentum. though in different language. He taught that each action is training, and the more you train in one direction, the easier that direction becomes. Train yourself in weakness, and weakness becomes your default. Train yourself in strength, and strength becomes your nature. Every choice is a turn of the wheel, and after enough turns, the wheel spins on its own. Momentum is also tied to the Stoic emphasis on self-perception. When you act consistently, you begin to see yourself differently. You start to identify as someone who follows through, someone who faces difficulty, someone who grows. This identity shift is crucial because people always act in alignment with their beliefs about themselves. If you see yourself as inconsistent, you behave inconsistently. But if you see yourself as disciplined, you behave in disciplined ways. This self-perception fuels momentum. You continue acting because you believe you are the kind of person who acts. Momentum also protects you from setbacks. When you have strong momentum, a single bad day does not derail you. You simply return to your routine the next day. But without momentum, small obstacles become overwhelming. One skipped practice becomes a week. One emotional reaction becomes a pattern. One lapse becomes a collapse. Momentum buffers you against this fragility by making your habits resilient. Another reason momentum is so powerful is that it reduces emotional resistance. Many people struggle with starting tasks because they fear discomfort, failure, or effort. But once they begin, they often find the task far easier than expected. Stoics understood this well. The anticipation of difficulty is often worse than the difficulty itself. Momentum eliminates this anticipatory anxiety. When you maintain consistent action, you do not experience the psychological buildup of dread before each task. You simply continue the motion you are already in. Momentum also creates a sense of destiny, not in a mystical sense, but in a practical one. When your actions accumulate and reinforce each other, you begin to sense that success is inevitable if you continue on your path. This belief creates confidence and reduces fear. You no longer worry about whether you will achieve your goals. You simply trust the process because you have already seen progress. This quiet confidence is deeply Stoic. It is the recognition that you cannot control the future, but you can control the path you walk with steady feet. Lastly, momentum ties directly to the Stoic concept of eudaimonia, a flourishing life. Flourishing is not a sudden achievement. It is the accumulation of hundreds of consistent actions performed over years. It is built in the small decisions, waking up early, exercising, speaking honestly, controlling desires, helping others, learning something each day. When these actions are repeated, momentum builds not just toward achievement, but toward character. Your life becomes a reflection of steady virtue. This is the Stoic definition of greatness. Not brilliance, but consistency. Not glory, but momentum. In the end, momentum is one of the most powerful forces in personal transformation. Once you begin acting consistently, your actions gain strength. They build upon one another. Effort becomes easier. Progress becomes natural. And eventually, the path you once struggled to walk becomes the path that carries you forward. Momentum is the reward of consistency. And once you have it, growth becomes almost unstoppable. For the Stoics, consistency is not merely a strategy, it is a way of being. It is the disciplined alignment of your actions with your values, your reason, and your purpose. When you force yourself, not violently, but with clarity and commitment, to act consistently, you create inner order. And where there is inner order, outer chaos cannot dominate. When your actions become steady, your mind becomes calm. When your mind becomes calm, your life becomes clear. And when your life becomes clear, it feels as if everything falls into place. Not by luck, but by the quiet power of daily discipline.